So how common is MASH? Because I know when we were trying to spread awareness as an organization, we found that a lot of people have never heard of what was then called NASH or NAFLD. So how common is this actually?
It is extremely common, and that's the scary part.
Mhm.
You know, if you go out on the street and start screening every adult who's walking down the street,
Mhm.
you'll find pretty much in most parts of the world, up between 30 and 40% of the general population actually has excess fat in the liver. So they have, by definition, MASLD. Now, of these, about 20 to 25% have steatohepatitis or MASH, which is the more aggressive form.
Mhm.
So 20% of 30% is still a big number.
Definitely.
And particularly, there are some populations where it is far more prevalent. For example, in people with type 2 diabetes. So,
Mhm.
as you know, that not only is diabetes becoming more common, but in parts of the world, and particularly in India and in West Bengal, uh, diabetes is a very big public health problem.
Mhm.
And within populations with type 2 diabetes, the prevalence of this disease, liver disease, is even higher, up to 70%. And a huge number, almost half of these, are the more aggressive form of the disease or MASH. And so it's not just a matter of having a little fat in the liver, they are more likely. And 90, over 90% of the time, it doesn't produce true symptoms that will make you think of liver disease until the disease is very far advanced. So it progresses silently, okay?
Mhm.
And it progresses silently and can eventually lead to cirrhosis. And 2 out of 3 people who show up in an emergency room with a complication of cirrhosis for the first time, that is also the first day their liver disease is diagnosed. There are data from Australia, from UK, from US, and I would bet you that is true for India as well, because wherever people have looked, it has been the same story. Now, it takes 20 plus years to develop cirrhosis.
Mhm.
So imagine this: 66, two-thirds of people who are showing up with a complication of cirrhosis for over 20 years. Nobody even diagnosed their liver disease, let alone do something about it.
Mhm. And they had it
So
all along.
they had it all along.
Mhm.
So neither the patient nor all the people who took care of them for assorted medical reasons,
Mhm.
not one of them picked it up and found it. That is truly, for me, the fundamental, most important thing we can do on NASH Day is increase awareness so that if you're a patient and you're going for your annual checkup, if you're overweight, if you have diabetes, if you have high blood pressure,
Mhm.
if your triglyceride levels are high, if your good cholesterol, which is the HDL cholesterol, if that level is low, ask your doctor about whether you might have excess fat in the liver,
Mhm.
and have them check a test called the FIB4 test.
Mhm.
The FIB4 stands for fibrosis 4. If you pull out your cell phone and you Google it right now, you will see FIB4 is based on 4 laboratory measures. Well, it's one is age and 3 laboratory measures: AST, ALT, and platelets. If you have those from your blood count at your annual visit, you can compute, you put it in the calculator, it'll tell you what your FIB4 score is. The FIB4 score allows us to put individuals who are at risk into a green zone, which is a safe zone, a orange zone, amber zone, which is like you're not no longer safe, you're at risk, and then a red zone where the threat is much more imminent. And even though you're having no symptoms at all, you otherwise feel fine. So it's a great first step. This is a test that can be done virtually anywhere, including rural health centers in India, as well as across the world. And so if you have risk factors, again, obesity, overweight, diabetes, high blood pressure, high triglyceride level, or a low HDL cholesterol, which is the good cholesterol. So the good cholesterol levels normally should be high, and the bad cholesterol, which is the LDL cholesterol, should be low.
Low.
And if you see the flip of that or any of these other risk factors, talk to your doctor about the possibility that you may have MASH and have a FIB4 check. If the FIB4 is less than 1.3, you're in the green zone.
Mm-hmm.
If it is more than 2.6, which is exactly double, you're in the red zone. And if you're in the middle, then you're in an intermediate zone. And if it's anything more than the green zone, probably warrants a visit to see somebody who knows more about the disease.
That was extremely helpful information. Thank you for that. And yeah, it sounds like we as people or potential patients have to take our own responsibility because it looks like a lot of healthcare systems, they themselves are not diagnosing it. So even though people are going for their annual checkups for years, they don't even know that they have this, and their doctors are doing the scans, they're doing everything, but they're not doing the proper diagnosis. So it looks like it's on also on us
Yes,
to.
I want to emphasize that you do not need an expensive scan
Hmm.
all the time.
Yeah.
If you start with something that simple as a FIB4, the people who have excess fat in the liver, who are not at immediate risk, when we talk about risk, we're talking about threat to life within the next 5 years.
Hmm.
That allows you to retest in a year or two. And so you can continuously assess if your risk profile is changing.
Hmm.
But uh, you don't need anything else.
Hmm.
It's only when you have more advanced disease, that's a much smaller group of people who need more advanced things. Our focus has historically been on finding advanced disease and treating it, which is important because, of course, they are the people closest to having a bad outcome and therefore most likely to benefit from any intervention that we do.
Yeah.
But in the long term, we also need to take a long view about how do we live in a more healthy manner. So we want to move away from single organ based disease management to a more holistic approach of what we call metabolic medicine or metabolic health. And so, what happens in the liver is replicated inside your arteries, inside your heart. It affects the pancreas, kidneys, muscles, and now it is emerging that it may also be happening in the brain, and that Alzheimer's disease may also be linked to the same root cause biology. So instead of creating an entire system and having, building awareness at one organ at a time, all of us should really be talking about not only the organ of interest for us, but how it links to all of these other organ disorders. And think about what we forget through all this specialty based medicine is we're talking about the same individual patient.
Hmm.
That if you put the patient in the middle of the story instead of the doctor and his expertise,
Hmm.
then you realize it's like blind people describing the elephant. The guy who has the trunk thinks the entire story is about the trunk. The guy who has the tail thinks the entire story is about the tail. The guy who has the leg thinks the entire story is about the leg, and so on and so forth. But they forget they're all talking about the same elephant.
Hmm.
And, and similarly, to draw that analogy, the diabetic patient that the diabetologist is worried about, the person with the heart disease that the cardiologist is worried about, the patient who has NASH that I'm worried about, the guy with the kidney disease that the kidney guys are worried about. We're all talking about the same guy. And so we need to not only bring awareness to all of the organs that are impacted by this root cause of excess fat tissue
Hmm.
and inflammation that's linked to it,
Hmm.
uh, but also make sure that we really think more holistically and develop preventive approaches. Because, what we are currently doing throughout the world is waiting for people to develop advanced disease when the organs themselves are irreversibly damaged or have severe damage. And then we're trying to see if we can stop it from getting worse or how to reverse it, which is an uphill battle. If we had more approaches on being metabolically healthy and were in a preventive mode right from childhood, then I think it would be an entirely different story. There'd be far fewer people who would be progressing onto more advanced disease. It would not require and eat up huge healthcare resources that many countries don't have, and would keep the people in the workforce. So, because in the current system, while we're waiting for people with advanced disease, many of them are no longer in the workforce because the disease takes them out of the workforce. But if you prevented organ disease from happening, you would imagine they might still be in the workforce. So for a lot of reasons, it is the right thing to do to not only increase awareness of liver as a key component of this entire constellation of disorders that occur in the same individual at the same time, but also to think about it in the context of all these other disorders and increase awareness within all of the physician groups that take care of all these different organs, as well as within the patient community, and bring the focus to where it needs to be, at the root cause. When you treat something at its root cause, you affect everything that is downstream of it. And it's a far more cost efficient and resource efficient and a far more ethical way of managing this massive global pandemic of steatotic liver disease that we're struggling with today.